Well, welcome to the show today. My guest is Michel Falcon. He's an entrepreneur, advisor, and international keynote speaker who leverages his people-first culture philosophy to create customer experience, employee engagement, and company culture strategies to grow businesses. Michel went from working for $10 an hour in a call center to advising and speaking at conferences for companies like Alfa Romeo, Verizon Wireless, and many more globally recognized brands. He and his business partners also operate a portfolio of restaurants and venues that have grown to earn tens of millions of dollars in revenue with more than 100 employees in less than 2 years. I wanted to bring Michel on the show to find out how he went from humble beginnings to advising some of the world's biggest brands, what he's learned about customer experience from his own experience consulting and running businesses, and how we can actually implement these strategies into our own businesses. So, Michel, welcome to the show.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me, James.
Of course. So, I'd love to start a little bit on your background and your story, just to give the audience a bit of a sense of, where you came from. So, could you just tell us quickly about what life was like for you growing up?
Yeah. As a child, growing up in Canada, and my parents were immigrants, they taught me a lot of values that I still use today and still practice, such as working hard, taking care of other people, being humble along the way if you achieve success, and just having perseverance and grit. And those values have been able to aid my career. Um, I didn't grow up an entrepreneur. I was never really the type of child to have like a lemonade stand, even though I likely did. But I'm not going to share those stories because they just weren't a part of my childhood. It was more kind of sports driven. And I did well in school, like C plus. Maybe that's like just getting by, I suppose. But I was an academic, and I joined business school or enrolled into business school because I wanted to learn how to grow businesses. But I recognize that, again, academia isn't for me, and I don't say that proudly. I think I left university after about 3 semesters, so a year and a half. And I'll never wave the college dropout flag. I'm not a bearer of that. It just I didn't learn well in the classroom, and it didn't make sense to me because I was struggling. I was paying for this education that may or may not have been relevant to grow a business. And I didn't come from a wealthy family, so I had to pay for my own post-secondary. It just didn't make sense. I was paying to acquire education that might not be relevant, and I wasn't doing well at it. That's kind of like three strikes. So I asked myself if there was perhaps a better way of learning about entrepreneurship, and I said, why don't I work for a company that was a true entrepreneurial story that I could learn from, get paid and get paid to contribute to their success. So be one of their employees. At the time in Vancouver, the two real popular companies to work for were Lululemon and a company called 1-800-GOT-JUNK. They operate in Canada, the US, and Australia. And essentially, you would pay them to get rid of a fridge from your house or a conference table and chairs from your office.
Yeah.
And that company's grown from humble beginnings in 1989, just one entrepreneur and a truck. And to date, he has a number of brands that collectively do over $300 million a year in sales. So that was the company that I chose because I felt like their culture aligned more with the type of environment I wanted to work within. So I chose them instead of Lululemon. And
Just before we dive into that, because I really want to talk about your time at 1-800 Got Junk, Michel, but I'm just really curious because it sounds like your early exposure to business wasn't actually that positive. Because I understand that your father had restaurants, and actually there was some struggles with that. So I'm just curious why you were interested to pursue entrepreneurship, even though you sort of saw at an early age the struggles that could come from that. Have you got any thoughts around that?
Yeah, I would just because my father, unfortunately, took some missteps in something that's not going to deter me. I'm confident in my own ability. But why I went the entrepreneur route is to be a leader, to execute on a plan and a vision that you have, to be a flag bearer. But you know, also being able to dictate your own schedule. Like today is Wednesday afternoon, and I'm sitting at my friend's cottage, and business is still operating, right? Because we've built this great team. So having the freedom to do that, having the ability to earn as much as you so want, really appealed to me. So I just kind of put my head down and said, if it's been done before, why not me?
I love it. It's a good point. Good attitude to have. So you did decide you wanted to work for 1-800 Got Junk, and you kind of looked at it, you saw it came from this humble beginnings, and you loved the culture, and it seemed to be a good fit. So could you maybe just take us through your journey of, I guess, where you started with 1-800 Got Junk and how that career progression actually played out for you with that company?
Yeah. I knew I needed to join a company at the ground floor just because that's probably what I could only earn. At the time, I don't think I would have gone hired on the corporate side of things at the organization because I didn't have that formal degree. That's what I thought, at least at the time. So I joined the call center and worked my first several months of employment within the call center. My shift started at 4 a.m. So that was pretty interesting as a 20-year-old that wanted to be going to bars with his friends and, not get home till 4 a.m. Right. So I kind of had to, make a decision, like what's more important for me today and for the future. And um, working that shift is what I had to do. It didn't pay a whole lot. But I knew it was my stepping stone into the organization, and that just if I put my head down and did good work and gain attention within the organization for all the right reasons, then I'm not going to be in the call center for long. And that's not to say anything negative about a call center as a career, working within a call center as a career. Pardon me. It wasn't for me. I see the importance of it absolutely. But after about the first year, I came across a Harvard Business Review article about a topic I had never heard of, and it was customer experience management. And I just was like, this is interesting, right? And at the time, I was kind of at a point being like, okay, if it's not going to be the call center life, what else am I going to do within this organization? So I remember one day I shadowed the marketing team to see what they were up to, and that was kind of appealing and interesting to me. But then I read their article, and I said, hey, I've never heard of this topic before. And I asked several people around me, at the organization, have you ever heard of this topic, customer experience management? And nobody said yes. So I said, okay, let me do some due diligence. I read about the topic, and I just learned about how Stories had been operating behind this model and earning great customer loyalty and so forth. And at the time, Zappos.com was just about to start getting a lot of PR and notoriety for their customer experience efforts. So I said, okay, this is going to be my thing. I'm going to build a career out of being a thought leader in the customer experience space. And
Yeah.
I soon realized that an organization cannot have a great customer experience if they have poor company culture and low employee engagement. So those are the three things that I'm quote unquote an expert in. But in the early days at 1-800 Got Junk, I was a student. And quite, to be frank, I'm still a student today. I'm still reading about companies that do things well that I admire so that I can sharpen my skills. But that all started at 1-800 Got Junk, transitioned into the operations side of the company, so on the corporate side, and spent 5 years there building systems and processes. And truth be told, I've worked with some of the biggest companies in the world, and I've seen the inner workings of them. And to this day, I will say that 1-800-GOT-JUNK has some of the more sophisticated operating plans of any company I've ever seen. And that's a junk removal company, not a multi-billion-dollar organization with better systems and processes. So that tenure at that company, I was there for five years. I was promoted 5 times during my time there. That was my MBA. Right. So, 20-year-old Michel, when he went to go talk to his mom, who's South American and really values education, telling her, hey, I was going to postpone business school to work for a garbage company. Right. Like, you can imagine that wasn't an easy conversation, but my mom and I talk about it now, and she's like, that was actually very smart. And I just had a vision for my career.
Yeah, that's great. It was good that you had that foresight to see that that was the case and you were going to learn a lot, because I understand people attempted to headhunt you to other companies for high paying roles, but you did take that long-term view and you realized what you were learning here was invaluable. So that's great.
That's one of the things that I say to professionals today is just learn before you earn. Right, like I didn't earn a lot of money at 1-800-GOT-JUNK, and I'm not saying that because they don't pay well. It's just like in comparison to what I wanted to be making, it was a drop in the bucket. But I knew I was learning, and I was going to leverage that education, so that down the road I would have the career I wanted with the income that I wanted, and that's what I'm trying to do at my companies now.
That's great lessons. So maybe you could take us through the transition from when you went from 1-800-GOT-JUNK to doing your own thing, and maybe just tell us the story of how you got your first client, which I believe was a moving and storage company in Vancouver. If you could just take us through that.
Yeah, I will, and I've actually never told this story, so I'm excited to share it now. I knew I was going to leave 1-800-GOT-JUNK, and I didn't know when it was going to be, but I knew what I would do after. And I said, you know what, I want to advise companies on their customer culture and employee related strategies. But one day, it was in 2012, I abruptly made the decision that I was going to hand in my notice that day. And I didn't even thought about it the night before. Like, it was in the back of my mind, but it wasn't in the forefront of my mind at the time. But then one day I woke up and said, I'm going to hand in my notice. So I did. And I remember speaking to my manager at the time, and I sat him down, and he looked at me. He's like, you're giving me your notice, aren't you? I'm like, I am. So I guess it was written all over me. But I remember giving like 6 or 8 weeks notice so I could help with the transition. And then I started, and then I was like, well, you better start trying to earn an income, because those paychecks every 2 weeks that used to land in your account are no longer there. And if I was to do it over again, I probably would have left with more money saved in my bank account, because the first few months were rough. Never start a consulting business in the month of December. Nobody's buying, nobody's doing anything. But during my offboarding at 1-800-GOT-JUNK, I was creating lists of people that I would reach out to and say, hey, I've left 1-800-GOT-JUNK when the time came. Can I advise for you? Something much better than that. But there was a moving company that wasn't actually too far away. Their head office wasn't too far away from where my parents lived at the time. And I had to move back home because, I didn't have that guaranteed income. I moved back in with my parents. And I remember during my time at 1-800-GOT-JUNK, during that period of time when I was offboarding, I'll share now that I used some of that time to pitch clients, during lunch hour or whatever, because I needed to kind of get that engine started for after my last day. And I remember calling the owner of this company. I still talk to him today. His name is Lauren McInnes, and he operated this moving company called Ferguson Moving and Storage. And I called him one afternoon, and I kind of pitched him the idea of like, hey, will you meet with me for a meeting? I think I can help your business. I used to work at 100 Got Junk. And he was like, "Oh, you know Brian Scudamore?" Then I'm like, "Oh crap, these guys are friends." Like, I hope that he's not gonna tell him like, "Hey, one of your employees just trying to pitch me on something." Thankfully, that didn't happen. But I guess Brian soon after, I was like, I probably got to tell Brian that I've handed my notice too, because he was a great mentor and has taught me many lessons. So that's how I started. They were Ferguson Moving and Storage. I remember I built a training and employee onboarding like handbook and manual for them. And it's very funny that you bring that up because I was actually just I was having a nostalgic moment yesterday thinking about that engagement, that first engagement. I think it was like for $3,000 or something, and I was like, yes, right, got my first 3,000. But it was humbling. Like I would be lying to you if there were times where I was just like, I don't know if I can do this. Like there's a Business Insider article that came out about my career, I guess, on August 1st, so not too long ago. And it talked like it was the first time I'd ever really been open with the struggles of entrepreneurship. And I'll share it with you now. Like there were times where I'm like, man, my credit cards are maxed out. I've had to take payday loans. I couldn't get a proper line of credit because I didn't have any verified income from years before. You know, and that's the struggle of starting a new business, right? The bank, if you want a line of credit, the bank's going to ask you like, okay, well, what did you do before this? Oh, you used to have a paycheck every 2 weeks. Now you don't. Like it's tough. So there's times where I'm like, I didn't even want to look at my phone when it rang because I'm like, it's probably another creditor, and it was tough, man. But things turned around. My first big client was Verizon Wireless. I believe their market cap's like $100 billion. So I went from Ferguson Moving and Storage, a company that did about $6 million at the time, to $100 billion. Like that was a big leap. Like I was like, how do I even write a proposal? Like what's a W-9 document? Like what? Like I have no idea what the hell's going on. So thankfully, Google was an aid, but I knew how to do the work. I just didn't know how to do the minutia of it, right? And even to this day, I suck at administrative stuff. It paralyzes me. But yeah, Verizon Wireless, and then the clients started staying of that size, and it was great. Like it was pretty cool. Like mid-20s, working with these big companies. We've flown around the world to some cool cities I probably would have never visited if it wasn't for work reasons. But then it got lonely, and I made a decision to move to Toronto to open a hospitality company.
Interesting decision.
Yeah, it was different, and that's not exactly how it ended up playing out, or it wasn't designed that way originally. I can tell you that during my consulting days, it got lonely. I missed being a part of a team like I had at 100 Got Junk. My friend, I was living in Vancouver at the time. My friend who lived in Toronto, someone I had known for several years before this time, and we had always wanted to work together because we just saw business from behind the same lens. Doesn't mean that we agreed all the time, but fundamentally we agreed on a lot of stuff. We had always wanted to work together. Opportunity didn't present itself until 2016, and paraphrasing, but essentially said, "Hey, me and my other partners are building this massive venue in Toronto. It's 4 stories, 16,000 square feet. Thousands and thousands of customers will come every month. and we're going to do $10 million in its first year in sales and have over 100 employees from day one. Come and consult for us. And I said, wow, this is awesome. This sounds like a real challenge. Okay, and it's going to bring me to Toronto. That's great. I've never lived there. I'm open to it. So 3 months turned into 6 months. So the engagement got extended. And then at 6 months, I was asked, like, do you want to join us as a partner? We have other plans to open up other venues. And in 2 years, we've opened up 2 venues. But if you know either of the venues, you know that they're large format. So we've gone from 0 to over 150 employees in 2 years, 0 to over $50 million a year. So really fast growth. And these aren't like mom and pop restaurants. They are full scale operations. They require a lot of effort. And during that, the one thing that I never gave up though was speaking. So I've always, since 2012 rather, keynote spoke at events. So that's part of my business as well too.
Yep, that's an amazing journey. And so the restaurants are your main project at the moment, and then the speaking as well. It sounds
Yeah,
like.
yeah. I balance the two along with promotion of my book and my online course that I launched as well too. So there's a lot to manage, but I'm thankful that I have a lot of great managers and a great team that allows me to be here on a Wednesday.
I love it. Well, I'd love to. So, your book, People First Culture, I'd love to dive into a few of the concepts with that. Because obviously, the thing I love about the book is that these are actually practical skills that you've learned from your experience consulting and also building your venues and restaurants, which have been such high growth. So, it comes from the trenches and it comes from experience. So, the credibility is there. So, I'd love to maybe if you could just first define what is a people first culture and why is that important?
Yeah, so a people first culture is defined by building a business that your customers and employees will both admire. Um, but that's easier said than done. Like, I think every individual, every leader would want that. But why is it that most companies fall short of actually achieving that? And when I mean most, like it's like the majority of companies fall short of achieving that. And there's a number of reasons, a lot of which has to do with leadership. Um, I was going to initially call the book People First Leadership, but then I changed it to culture because I thought it was more kind of encompassing for other people than I didn't want it just to be for executives or senior leaders. Because to your point, there's a lot of practical, fundamental things that I think that we neglect, which I dive deep into within the book. But essentially, I wanted it to be a resource for people to be like, to pick up a piece of literature and read it and be like, you know what, I can actually use this stuff. And for me, I rather the way that I build systems and processes are in a cost-friendly manner. I don't want to have to write a big check to find a solution to something. So that's what the book shares, is just practical, affordable strategies that work.
Absolutely. And maybe we could talk a bit about the 3P strategy, which was something that I got a lot of value from. So could you maybe just tell us what the 3Ps are and then we can maybe dive into each one?
Absolutely. So the 3P strategy is what allows a company to go from, yes, I care about employees and customers, to I'm actually showing and implementing strategies to make that work. So it hinges everything together to allow it to come to real life. And the 3P strategy is purpose, process, and profit. And that in that order. And I conceptualized these two concepts early in 2018. The book came out in October 2018. And I really wanted to create a framework of like, how do you do this? So within the 3Ps, the first is purpose. Understand the purpose of your company, understand the purpose of your customers, and understand the purpose of your team members as individual human beings, not as workers. Um, what is the purpose of your company? Well, it's probably embedded within the missions and values of your organization. I don't think that's all too revolutionary. But the thing is a lot of companies have missions and values, but they don't live by them. It's like they check something off their to-do list one week and said, I created a mission and values, and then they plaster it on their walls in their office. That's not culture. It's an element of it, but it's not the only thing. Culture is the purpose that's deep rooted inside the foundation of the company, and having everybody align behind that. That's what culture is. In the purpose of the company, the culture of the company, that can change, right? Like from company to company, nobody's right or wrong, for the most part at least. But what I mean by that is like Netflix's company culture and purpose is different than Zappos.com's culture. Neither of them are right or wrong. It's just whatever that they've wanted to represent their culture and have themselves aligned behind it. It's not for everyone, and that's okay. The purpose of the customer. Each customer has a different definition of success with your company. Like for me, if you're my bank, I don't really care to have chit chat with your tellers, right? Like if that's not, I don't need to have those conversations. And it might make me sound arrogant or rude. It's just like I've come to have a transactional relationship with you, and that's okay, right? A lot of people are transactional like that. Whereas somebody like my mother, her purpose is to be friends with every single person that she does business with. Because that's a part of her purpose. That's who she is with her, the way that she behaves as a consumer. Right? So we have to teach our team members that you can't deliver service the exact same way to every single customer. And then lastly, purpose of the individual. If you have 2, 5, or 6 direct reports, you should intimately understand what is their purpose in their career. And it might not even involve you and your company, and that's okay. Right? I treat somebody that I know who's leaving me in a month the same way that I would treat somebody that would be working with me for a decade, because that's just proper human behavior. I'm on a crusade to bridge the gap between the relationships that we have and the way that we behave with people in our personal life as we do our professional life. And the most layman representation I can give you is, if I have a friend named James come visit me from Vancouver, and he asked me to come pick him up from the airport, do you think I'm driving down the highway thinking, what is the ROI of picking up James from the airport? No, it's absolutely not. It's to have a lifelong friendship with him. So why can't we take that same philosophy in the relationships that we have with the people that we manage? And that's just a representation of servant and benevolent leadership. Like, just be a good human being first, and don't try to help others before you've sorted yourself out. That's like, let me be clear on that. Don't listen to 22-year-old life coaches. Like, figure yourself out first. That's a little jab at life coaches, but they've asked for it. I'm only kidding, but that's purpose, right? Understand the purpose of the company, create alignment behind that, understand the purpose of customers, share that education, and understand the purpose of the team members that you surround yourself with, and achieve and celebrate together along the way when you win.
Yep, that's great. And obviously the book goes deeper into good questions you can ask yourself and processes for actually defining those purposes. So what's the next step? So next step is process.
Process, yeah. So that's where you build operational processes, standard operating procedures, whatever you use, whatever you call them. For me, it's quarterly strategic initiatives. So every quarter we'll sit down and be like, hey, let's do 1, 2, 3. Okay, let's put our heads down for 3 months. We'll see you in 3 months, right? Like, let's support each other along the way, but we know where we have to be in 3 months because we're going to be creating other processes. So essentially, their processes to enrich the lives of your customers, your employees, and your community. On the community side, it could be philanthropic efforts. If you own a retail location like we do, you need to earn the permission from your community to operate within it, and rent is due every single month, right? Like that is like you must always give back, give back, give back, because that's you either grow with your community or the community is going to leave you behind. And I truly mean that. We operate on a street called King Street, and we host like King Street Care drives that we help raise money, or come Thanksgiving help hand out turkeys, and things like that. So that's a process from the community side. The process on the customer side, it could be, we're going to survey our customers this quarter, or if we currently are, we're going to do it better next quarter. And then the process side of the employees, how are you? One of them is like, what's your interview strategy like? Like, I bet you it could be better. Like, we're not that good at interviewing. Like, the average company is not that good at interviewing. Like, if you go to the Netflix of the world, yeah, of course, they're great. But, like, that's the thing. Regardless of whether you're a $1 billion company like Netflix or Ferguson Moving and Storage, a $6 million company, they recognize that our process for training and onboarding needs to be better. And that's when they hired me in 2013. So they got it. Now they're much bigger today. Like I don't know how many franchises Warren has sold, but they're a much bigger company today than they were back then. And it's because a lot of the process allowed them to scale. So that book I gave them, I'm certain it's probably been refined since then, but that booklet is probably given to each one of their franchisees, right? Because you build the process. And in that case, it was enriching the life of the employee, setting them up for success, right? And if that happens and you do it well guess what's going to happen? Your employee retention rate goes up. Your employees are trained better, so they'll produce better results faster, right? So like if Joey on your sales team isn't selling well enough in the period of time that you expected, well, people don't fail, processes do. So that's something that I learned at 1-800-GOT-JUNK. The saying there was people don't fail, systems do. I chose to go with people don't fail, processes do. It aligns pretty nicely with the 3P strategy. So I tweaked the language, but it's true. So Joey isn't selling properly. Okay, is it Joey's fault, or maybe one of the processes broke down? Maybe our training process isn't as good as we think it is. If you ask yourself that honest question and you say, you know what, no, it is really good because we just invested in it and 90% of our team members are crushing it right now. It can't be that. Well, what other process failed that allowed Joey to not be getting it? Well, maybe our interview process isn't up where we need it to be. How did Joey get through the interview process? Where we're supposed to have safeguards in place to ensure that we only have high performers and great culture fits. So that's the whole process part, is right. Just not only building them, you don't just build them once. Every 3 months, you got to be building some new systems and processes to elevate the company. And then the last P is profit. Now, profit is a reward for your people first culture efforts. And this is where, you get free media, because the media wants to talk about you because you're unique. You actually care about the community, customers, and employees. There's a story to be told there. You get great Google reviews, or however which way you survey your customers. Customers come back on their own. You don't need to incentivize them to come back, which eats at your margins. They refer people as advocates. They're not even asking to be paid. That is growing a business organically, because that income that you're collecting through referrals and repeat customers, high profitability, because they're just coming back on their own. But like Starbucks took their money that most companies would put into traditional advertising, like Super Bowl ads. They took that money and put it into learning and development. And Howard Schultz the former chairman of the company. I'm paraphrasing, but he says something along the lines of, people think we are a great advertising company, but we actually don't traditionally advertise. We take what the traditional company would spend on advertising and put it into learning and development. And like, say what you will about their product, there's a lot of naysayers about Starbucks coffee, but if you ignore that for a moment, like, they're a pretty successful company. I would like to have started that company, and I don't know anybody that would say otherwise. And if they did, they're lying. If they are truly into building, if they aspire to grow a globally recognized brand. But and then what about the profit of high employee retention, right? You're not spending as much money on training, on recruiting efforts, paying recruitment firms, right? Your headaches are down because the people aren't turning over. How can you actually have great customer loyalty if the people that the customers are loyal to are always turning over, right? Like, there's a reason why our diners at our restaurants and our guests come and ask to speak to be sitting in specific sections of our servers that they built rapport with last time. There's a reason why Riley, one of our bartenders, will have people come sit at his bar. How can that be achieved if you have high employee turnover? So, the profitable business, like, I'm a profit-driven entrepreneur. How I earn my profit might be a little bit more patient and a different approach to earning it than others. But I'm not comparing myself to anybody. This is just the way that I see business, and I don't think I'm wrong, or right. It's just the way that I'm doing my thing.
Yep, totally. And I love that whole strategy because you start with the purpose, which is basically getting your mindset right. You're defining success for yourself, your employees, and your customers. You're then implementing the processes that help you actually build out that purpose. And then the profit is just the result of doing those first two steps correctly, which I love. So it's a great strategy. And so the book's full of great stuff like this. So we'll definitely link that up in the show notes if people want to check it out. But one thing I wanted to talk about as well, because you've got the book, but you've also got a course called Team Operating System, which I had a look at. And yeah, I'd love for you just to tell us what Team Operating System is and who it's actually suitable for and what they're going to get out of it, if you could.
Yeah, after the book came out, I had many people reach out to me and say, "Hey, will you consult for us?" And I don't do any more consulting, so I was just saying, no, respectfully. And eventually I said no one too many times. I said, okay, I got to build something else here. So naturally, that was an online course. That's what I thought would be a good solution to consulting full time, because that's not what I wanted to do at all. Not at this point in my career. But the course essentially is a 6-module series that gives away all of my templates, PowerPoint slide decks. Like, here's our culture deck. Here's how we train our employees, and it's built in a way so that anybody that takes the course can just put their logo on it and use that content and make edits along the way to make their own. So I've done the heavy lifting, and for me as an operator, I essentially built the course that I would have wanted in 2012 as I was trying to learn these strategies and processes to bring them into our business. Even during my time at 180 Jump, I would have loved this course. And of course, I know I'm biased. I sound biased because I built it, but it generally is something that I would have wanted, and that was my motivation in building it. It's been very interesting watching the people sign up, because when I built it, I sat down with my marketer and he was like, okay, who's our target audience? I said, oh, it's the entrepreneur that runs a business between 5 million to 100 million. And that made sense because it could be used for that type of company. But then I was like, what about the executive I used to consult for at the multi-billion-dollar company? Like, they could buy this too. So I know like there's like a golden rule of marketing to really focus just on one demographic, but I was like, I can't. Like this is applicable to both. And so I've seen a $5 million a year dental practice sign up in Canada. I've seen an optometrist sign up as well too, small business. I've seen a multi-billion-dollar company in the U.S. sign up, and it was their director, one of their directors on the operations side of the business. So it's been really interesting seeing, like, the way I can describe it is, if you have customers, if you have employees, regardless of your industry, then the information is for you. However, you would need to have a kind of a right hand person, whether that's a COO or somebody to help you implement the practices. Because I don't even want people to sign up if they're not going to use the information. And I understand that sometimes you need an operator to help implement these processes. But that's essentially what the course is about. It's, if you want to learn how to better your company culture, improve your customer experience, and increase your employee engagement, then it just gives you all the strategies that I use in my business and I've used in my career.
That's great. And yeah, there's obviously the 6 different modules, and they all go in depth into everything from building company culture, hiring, how to interview people, customer retention, employee retention, just all these key points that a lot of businesses do get wrong. So it's great that you're able to share your experience from consulting and also growing your own businesses and sort of package it up into this thing that people can consume. So I love that. So sort of coming up on the end of the interview here, Michel, thanks for sharing everything so far. It's been really great. But just a few quick questions just to close us out. I just want to know what's coming up next for you. So you're obviously spending some time in the sun at the moment by the looks of it on a Wednesday, as you said, which is great. But what's the rest of your year look like? Any big projects?
I'm doing a lot of speaking to finish up the year. October will be a very busy month for that. And just continuing to operate within our hospitality company, promoting the book, promoting the course. So I am working on something for 2020, which I will do on my own. But if you check back in come October, it will be made public what that is then.
Awesome. Sounds good. So is there anything I haven't asked you, or just anything you want to really make sure you pass on to the audience before we finish up here, Michel?
Yeah, the things that I suggest, strategies, whether it's in the book or the course, aren't all that hard to wrap your brains around. I think it's things that people would say, yeah, I need this for my business. The only barrier of entry is you have to be willing to be a servant or a benevolent leader. This stuff the strategies and processes will enrich the lives of your customers, your employees, and your community, and that will grow your business. But you got to be very genuine about your leadership style. Like, just be good to people, and you'll build a great business.
Good message. It all starts with being good, so I love it. So what's the best way for people to connect with you, Michel, if they want to check out the book or the course or just follow what you're up to? What would you say is the best way?
My parents have blessed and cursed me with my name, so they can go and search me just on Amazon or on YouTube or on LinkedIn or Instagram or whatever. My first and last name, Michel Falcon. Michel spelled like Michael without the A. So, yeah, just search me there. I'll pop up wherever you like to hang out.
Awesome. Well, we'll link all that up in the show notes. But Michel, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I really appreciate you. You've got a really wide-ranging career and a lot of great experience building company culture, building out those processes, and the way you've been able to distill it into ways that people can consume and apply to their own businesses is amazing. So thank you for coming on and sharing your experience with us today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Hey everyone, thank you for listening to this interview with Michel. Hope you got a lot of value from it. If you use Apple Podcast, Got a quick favor to ask. Can you go into the app and leave me a rating and review? Because that really helps me out in terms of growing the show audience and making sure that more people are listening to these interviews. And if you don't use Apple Podcasts, you can still help me out. Just take a screenshot of yourself listening to this interview. You can post that to Instagram stories, tag me in that, tag Michelle as well. And if you could do one of those two things, it would really help me out and it would mean a lot. So I hope you have a great day.